Welcome to the Low Demand Parenting Podcast, where we drop the pressure, find the joy, and thrive, even when it feels like life is stuck on level 12 hard. I'm Amanda Diekman, author, autistic adult, and mom of 3. I'm not here as an expert, but a fellow traveler. Together, we're learning how to live more gently, authentically, and vibrantly in this wild parenting life. Today's podcast is What About the Siblings? This is a pain point for so many in our community as we lovingly tend to our high needs child who requires often round-the-clock support, nonstop co-regulation, and whose dysregulation can be really big. It can be aggressive, it can be scary, and it can often be externalized and pointed toward another kid in our family. When we begin dropping demands and providing that support that one kid needs, it really brings up a big question. What about the siblings? I want to tell you about a story in our family when this felt really acute for me. This was a couple of years ago. It was a kind of a typical morning for us. One kid was at the table eating cereal. Another kid came downstairs, saw her eating cereal, and in a flash, just in the amount of time it took him to scan the kitchen, see the situation, he was instantly in a aggressive meltdown, yelling at her, telling all of us that we were terrible, and ultimately underneath it, so sad. He was so sad. He was heartbroken. What I came to learn as I listened deeply to him is that he had an idea in his mind of what cereal he was going to eat as he came down the stairs. And when she was already eating it, because of the way that he's wired and because of the way that his OCD was working that day, it then felt like he could not have that same cereal, that she had taken it from him. It felt personal. It felt like a giant loss. And of course, he was already so hungry, so he was already dysregulated. Just as I was really getting to understand what was happening, my third kid came downstairs. He took in the scene. One kid cowering in the kitchen, the other completely dysregulated. He just turned around and walked back upstairs. As a parent, doing my absolute best to meet all of these needs, it felt like, how could I possibly care for all 3 of these little people at the same time when we can't even eat breakfast without somebody's needs going unmet? And if you're raising a child with intense needs, you already know this. You know how consuming it can be. And when there's siblings that also have intense needs, or on the flip side, siblings who are working really hard to go under the radar, to be easy, to be flexible, even to take care of you, it gets more complex. So this episode is about the siblings. This is about the ones who need help, the ones who hide, the ones who get overlooked, the ones who rise up and fight back and insist on their own needs in sometimes surprising ways. I want to share 5 truths that have helped me show up with more compassion for my kids and for myself when I'm standing in this complex sibling terrain. The first truth is that it makes sense if it feels impossible. In my low demand masterclass, people often come in hoping that I will swoop in as their guru to solve these really tricky situations for them. They're like, how do I do it? How do I find this ease and joy that you talk about when our needs are in direct competition with each other, where one kid can't even be in the room when it's too loud and another one can't eat the same cereal as the first one, and then one just wants to be safe, and the needs are exactly opposite. And people are like, help me, Amanda. There's a piece that we have to name, which is, of course, it's impossible. It's hard because it's hard. It's not hard because you're messing it up. It's not hard because there's an easy answer out there and you've just missed it. It's not hard because you're inadequate, or you're broken, your needs are too much, you're traumatized, you're solo parenting, you're unsupported. Like, all those things might play into it, but it's hard because it's hard. In a way, this work is impossible. The expectation that we could meet all of our kids' needs all at the same time is literally impossible. The math just doesn't add up. It's one adult, 3 kids, competing needs, high needs, sensitivity off the charts. There's often no backup. So you're not doing it wrong. You're trying to do the impossible. Maybe it's time to let go of the idea that you could get it all right. While we're dwelling in the impossible, if you have a PDA child in your family, a child with pathological demand avoidance or pervasive drive for autonomy, which is a neurodivergent profile where demands often land like a threat in their body and nervous system, and where they have a survival drive for control and autonomy and freedom. Having a PDA child in the family creates significant tension for siblings. If there's only one PDA child and the sibling is neurotypical or non-PDA, those siblings often find themselves bending and accommodating, which creates an imbalance in the family dynamic that can lead to frustration or resentment. The sibling without PDA may not understand why their sibling needs so many exceptions and accommodations. It feels like they're carrying an extra load. If you have a family with multiple PDAers, this can be even more charged. This is what we have in our family. When no one is willing to bend, when no one is able to bend, you get constant power struggles, emotional dysregulation, and the conflict is endless. Each child is fighting to maintain their autonomy and control, and the result is often a clash of wills that is incredibly tough, if not impossible, to manage perfectly. And even in families with a PDA who's an only child, there are often sibling-like dynamics that emerge. What typically happens is that there's no sibling to provide that co-regulation or to receive the child's dysregulation. So one parent will become the primary target. This can lead to a whole set of challenges as one parent becomes the co-regulating parent, the safe parent, the emotionally attuned parent, and the other parent can feel like the punching bag, the one who's rejected, the one who has to be controlled all the time. It can lead to a set of challenges as a parent takes on this dual role as both parent and sibling, which can be draining and destabilizing and scary for the parent who's occupying that role and for the parent who's having to co-regulate people who are often being pulled into more childlike responses. It's important to remember that there are no perfect solutions. For many of us, conflict, fights, meltdowns end up landing like a failure for us as parents. We imagine that we will have made it when we can all get along, when we can go out for a day and just enjoy each other's company, or maybe just get through a game of Uno. We end up setting up success as the absence of conflict or meltdowns. And then we're always feeling like we're failing because that may be impossible for your family in this season. In reality, sibling conflict is a natural part of family life, even if we shame it or blame it, especially in a household with a PDAer. This conflict is unavoidable. We aren't striving for perfection. We're focusing on navigating conflicts, the ones that arise naturally, and finding ways to repair when things inevitably break down. You may find yourself trying to be proactive and constantly looking ahead, looking for ways to prevent this conflict before it happens. And yes, it is important to be proactive and create a safe and supportive environment, but we're not always able to foresee every meltdown. We can't prevent every argument. What matters more is how we help our kids through the conflict once it arises. And this is where rupture and repair comes in. The second point is that what we are learning from relational neuroscience and from some really great research that's come out in the last 10 years is that relationships that know how to break and heal again, or what they call rupture and repair, those relationships are actually stronger than relationships that do not have conflict in them. So the absence of conflict in a relationship is not a sign necessarily of its strength. Actually, relationships that bear scars, that bear wounds, but also bear legacies and memories of repair, those are the strongest ones. I want to walk through how I approach this rupture and repair for my kids in sibling relationships and give you a model for how you might walk through this with your own kids. The first step is to give time for nervous systems to return to stability. We often try to create repair too quickly. They just got done screaming at each other and we're asking them to take some sort of step. Now clean this up together or say you're sorry. We're trying to get them to repair before they are in any way ready. Sometimes it takes days before the repair can happen. And that's good. It's actually so important to honor that. That's where repair goes from being forced and performative into being a genuine act of healing. You cannot create meaningful repair when you're flooded with emotion or caught in a shame spiral. So we take as long as we need for everyone to settle before addressing the conflict. The second step is that as the parent, I own my part in the rupture. And this is part modeling and part just real honesty. We're a family dynamic. I'm usually in there too. So it could be that my kids were bickering back and forth, and then I tried to step in and push them to resolve it with my own idea of how it should be fixed, which then escalated the situation and they began hitting or screaming. Maybe I was the one who was supposed to be keeping track of turn taking on who uses the VR, but I forgot and got distracted, and one person had a super long turn. The other person's really mad and they get into a big fight about it. Before we can address the fight, I need to own my part in the solution that was supposed to help keep everyone safe, that I didn't do it. This is modeling accountability. It is also a truth telling for me as the parent that we all contributed to this situation. In step 3, I check in with the child who was hurt. When everyone is calm enough for conversation, I start with the one who was harmed. Sometimes it's not so simple to figure out who was harmed, and that's okay. I'm not doing it to prove a point. I'm not doing it to punish the one who I'm assuming is the perpetrator. I'm just acknowledging that before we can own what we did to contribute to the situation, we first need to be heard in our woundedness. So I might assume that both kids are the ones who are harmed. I go to them with empathy and ask, what happened? What did you try before you came to get me? What would you like to have happen next? Can you imagine a way for your sibling to make this right with you? What would you want to see or hear or know? Is there some way that I can help you heal? This gives them a chance to express their needs and feel heard. And if your kid hates questions, then don't bombard them with questions. Maybe one curious opening, like, that looked really awful back there, and I think you got your feelings hurt, or I think you got physically hurt. Do you want to tell me what happened? And then sitting in open witnessing posture as they share their reality with you. The fourth step in the rupture and repair process is that I return to the child who might have caused the harm. And again, this could be both of them. They might both be hurt and both have caused harm. And I say something like, you got dysregulated and you hurt someone you love, and that sucks. I hate hurting the people I care about. You know, your sibling still loves you and they want to do some healing. Is there something you'd like to do or say to show your love? And here I've got two sides of the puzzle, right? I've got one kid who has needs, who has some way that they're hoping that their sibling will make it right. And then I've got a conversation with the other one about how they might like to show their love, about something they might want to do. And then as the facilitator, as the guide, as the parent, I can discern what is doable for one kid to offer and for another kid to receive. So I step into step 5, which is facilitating the repair. Sometimes it's a verbal apology, but often it looks way different. They'll come up with their own kind of repair. I want my sibling to help me build my Minecraft world. And I go to the other one and they're like, sure, I can do that. It's not something as the adult I ever would have come up with, but for them, it's meaningful repair. As a 6th step, I revisit the underlying issue later. So the conflict itself needs repair, yes. The yelling, the hitting, the slamming of doors, the calling of names, the kicking out of a Minecraft server, whatever it is that happened, that all matters. But there's usually a reason that it happened. There was some underlying issue, something that was too hard for them to manage on their own, some kind of expectation they had that wasn't met, even if it's to your adult mind completely irrational, like for my kid who came downstairs and saw their sibling eating the same cereal. That is real to them. That was an underlying need. I can't eat the same cereal as my sibling does, or I can't have my sibling eat my cereal. Whatever the underlying issue is, I return to that. And I think about a way that we could solve that core issue before it got into the level of conflict. So the first truth is that it's hard because it's hard, and it's okay if it feels impossible. And the second truth is that relationships that know how to break and repair are stronger than ones that never have any breaks at all. And the third is that we are often contributing shame to sibling conflicts. Sibling conflicts often emerge when one child is trying to manage their big emotions or establish a sense of safety and control, and they're using their sibling to do that. For PDAers especially, these conflicts are often due to rebalancing behaviors, which is a core piece of the PDA experience, because we have this survival need for control and autonomy and freedom and mastery. We scan the room for the person who can most easily give us that. PDAers are acutely aware of power and hierarchy. And so the reality of a younger sibling or a sibling that the PDAer feels that they have the potential to control, they'll use that control in order to restore themselves, in order to feel better. It's a kind of rebalancing. It can also be called equalizing by Casey Ehrlich or leveling by Christy Forbes. I usually call it rebalancing because that's how it feels to me. Like the relationship is out of balance and I need to do something in order to even the scales of justice. This could be for younger kids grabbing a toy, or for older kids lashing out or making a sharp remark. There have been times where my kids have rebalanced with each other by hiding things that are precious to the other one, or by using my time and attention in order to feel like they're getting more. And I want to name that these behaviors, while they are the kinds of behaviors that our society shames and blames and says you're a bad kid if you do that, they're not rooted in malice. This is not a bad kid. It's a response to internal overwhelm. It's a dysregulation behavior, not a bad kid behavior. But when we see them, we often respond with shame, using punishment, criticism, or dismissal. And that exacerbates the issue. When I talk to parents about dropping demands and especially letting go of punishment, this is one of the places where they're least likely to be able to do it. They'll say, I can let go in most situations, but when my kid hurts their sibling, I just can't let it go. I have to address it. And I think that the core need there is a desire to show the sibling that they matter. And you're using punishment as the way of communicating to the sibling, you matter. But ultimately, that cycle of punishment and shame and blame makes the more vulnerable sibling, the PDAer, or the one who's in burnout, or the one who's most struggling, the one who dysregulates externally by hurting other people rather than hurting themselves, which is what internalizers do. It's taking that more vulnerable kid and it's just pouring gasoline onto their fire. That dysregulation makes them more likely to lash out in the future. Then they get punished and shamed and blamed more. Ultimately, the safest thing you can do for the sibling who's being hurt is to shift your family culture away from shame and punishment. It's actually compassion, understanding, de-escalating, and repair, returning to the issues causing these dysregulative moments in the first place, and doing that core low demand work of dropping expectations in a way that doesn't generate conflict. It's those moves that protect the sibling. The fourth truth is that conversations about disability in your family really matter. For many parents, it can feel daunting to talk about disability with your children. You might worry about labeling your child, or you don't have a label to give them yet. You worry that discussing their disability might make them feel different in a negative way. But the truth is that when we avoid these conversations, we miss the opportunity to help our children understand themselves and their siblings on a deeper level. When we don't talk about something that's happening in our family dynamic, it adds an air of secrecy and shame to the conversation, as though this can't be talked about. The more we bring it out into the open, give it language and words, we create a culture of openness, of de-shaming, of curiosity, and of connection. It allows the disabled kid or family member, or the one who's really struggling, to name their experiences and to be witnessed for who they truly are. For the siblings, especially if they're neurotypical or not disabled in the same way, these conversations give them insight about why their sibling is behaving the way they are, and it teaches them language that opens up empathy and accommodation. Don't shy away from words like disabled, autistic, PDA, ADHD. These terms aren't negative. They're neutral descriptors that help to explain the way your child is experiencing the world. So instead of saying something like, he just can't apologize right now, maybe try saying his nervous system is overwhelmed. And part of his disability is that when he feels like he's losing control, he can't apologize in that moment. But when he feels safe again, he'll be able to apologize in his own way. That gives so much more helpful information that can be empowering for your kid to accurately interpret what's happening. It's also important to talk about how the disability impacts everyday life. Not just saying, oh, she's PDA, so that's why, or that's an ADHD thing, but getting specific. So like your sister has ADHD, and that means it's really hard for her to shift her focus quickly. So when she's playing a game and she can't stop right away, it's not because she's ignoring you or because she hates you or doesn't want to play. It's because her brain needs time to transition. Bringing disability conversations into your daily life opens up the possibility of talking about structural ableism. We aren't talking about just individual differences here. We're talking about how our societies, how our families, how our gatherings are structured. And they're structured in ways that makes it harder for some people to thrive. So you might point out a space that isn't wheelchair accessible, or where there's no place to sit if you get dizzy, or a space where the overhead lights are way too bright or the noise level is not accommodating. And you can explain this as structural ableism. It's ways that our society is structured that don't accommodate people with disabilities, which helps your kids connect the dots and think about how they could be a part of creating more inclusive spaces. It normalizes these conversations, helping them understand that disabled people are everywhere and that part of our collective responsibility, our collective possibility, is to create homes and gathering places and communities where disabled people's needs are central to the conversation. It's okay to acknowledge that living with a disability yourself or living with a disabled family member can be really hard. Disability doesn't have to be cloaked in the kind of superpower myth. These things hurt. It can be like walking with a limp. It can be really difficult. And we get to hold compassionate space there. So when we see a behavior, we can say, I know it's really tough when your brother gets upset and yells at you. And it's hard for him too. He's suffering too. But that doesn't make it any easier for you. We're holding space for this to be painful and difficult without any easy answers. There's no tidy bow that we need to put on it for our kids. I think that they can hold the nuance more than we often give them credit for. The last truth is that this is your siblings' lived reality too. Even if they have a normal life, go to school, have friends, they're impacted by the reality that they have a disabled sibling, or that their sibling is often dysregulated, or that your household is full of screaming, or that things are just so much harder for you in your home than what you might see in other families or wish for. And there's this way of holding on to the fantasy for them. If I can just insulate them from this enough, if I can just separate them from it enough, they can still have this kind of quote unquote normal life. But I really think that does the sibling a disservice. This is their lived reality. They don't know a world in which they don't have a disabled family member. They don't know what it's like, and they never will. The fantasy that you can hold on to is a version of denying their real lived reality. They need words from you. They need compassion from you, but they also need you to acknowledge and accept that this is their life, and to start living from that place, to let go of the fantasy. They want to see their sibling treated with dignity and respect. They want their home to be a place of accommodation and safety for their sibling, because that matters to them too, and because that is key for them being able to belong. So many siblings that look on the surface like everything is fine, they're actually just internalizing their struggles. They may also have a disability. They may also have a neurological difference. They may also have a dysregulated nervous system. Right now, they're looking around and thinking, I can't let this out because it's just going to make mom and dad terrified and stressed. It's going to mean I've got shame and blame piled onto me. They want me to be the good kid. I want to be the good kid. And it ends up silencing their distress and their need, and further enforcing this idea that they need to be the good one. You don't know what your quote unquote normal kiddo is dealing with, but the way that you are managing their siblings' challenges says everything to them about how you might manage theirs. De-shaming their sibling, not only does it make it easier for them because they're not getting hurt as much, but it sends a deep message to their struggling inner self that says, when you're struggling, I won't shame you either. When you're struggling, I'll bring you understanding and empathy. When you're struggling, we're going to get you help and support and find ways to repair what's broken, because that's how we do it as a family. It feels as though you're protecting the sibling by shaming their sibling and punishing them and saying, oh, they're the worst, I'm so sorry. I don't think that this is what they really need from you. And so I'm giving you permission to let that go. If this podcast is speaking to your soul, you can subscribe through wherever you get your own podcasts. Even better, if you feel the nudge, head on over to Apple Podcasts in particular and leave us a review. It's such a helpful way for new people to also get to experience what this podcast wants to bring into their lives. I'm Amanda. Remember, it takes great strength to let things go. I'll see you next week.